incremental move. And now this ruling is one I think that we really have to pay attention to. To talk about that and more is Christie Hutcherson. She is somebody who has been on the border for some time, doing the kind of reporting we need. We don't see it in the mainstream to illustrate that, especially during this Biden administration, we have had an influx of people, not just from Mexico, not just from South America, but from around the world. So, Christie, thank you so much for joining us. What is your view on this latest Supreme Court decision?
Well, Jason, I was listening to your open monologue, and you are very clearly on the correct path of where we're going with our country. The Constitution of the United States of America is no longer the ruling document of the land. And, Justice Roberts, I was not surprised by his decision, because he has time and time again fallen on the wrong side of history in many cases that he's looked at. But when you look at Coney Barrett, she's interesting because, under the Trump administration, she was also appointed by President Donald J. Trump. But who was her biggest advocate within that administration? And one of those individuals was none other than the Vice President Pence, which is a globalist. And so we have this uniparty system, and make no mistake, people think, well, at the end of the day, some of the things that they're ruling make sense, and they're for the people. But then at the overall scheme of things, right, they tend to fall when the hardcore matters really matter with the Constitution. They don't fall on the right side of history. And here's the question that begs: what do they have on these individuals in the court systems? Because clearly this is a violation of the separation of the states and the federal government.
No, absolutely. No, I think that blackmail is obviously a part of these things, but I think that a lot of people just don't want to lose what they have, right? They don't want to lose that house or that bank account or make life more difficult. And a lot of these people quite literally are malleable. But now with this issue, especially, when you can come in and say, again, enough is enough. You're doing your thing. You're doing the people's will, especially those on the border. I know that you've interacted with a lot of these ranchers, farmers, people that just live in surrounding neighborhoods. And this has been an issue for a long time. It has been supercharged under the Biden administration. And look, Biden is probably the biggest puppet we've ever seen in our lifetimes, clearly not running anything, but openly when he was running, he said to surge the border. And the border has never been more deregulated. I saw it firsthand. We talked about this just briefly before the show. For the first time, flying back from the Reawaken America tour, I had a layover over in Phoenix, Arizona. My flight was delayed so they could have a dozen or so illegals who had packets, who were together, who did not. One of them came up to me and asked whether, well, he first of all asked me if I knew Spanish. Muy pequeño, everybody, just a wee bit. He was at the correct terminal. Couldn't have been older than 15 years old. I think I may be giving him something. Another 12-year-old boy beside me. There was one like Wrangler type, some hipster looking guy, looked like between 25 and 30, with just one of the female individuals. And that's it. He's the one getting them on the planes. And then they're going directly into Chicago. New York City is another place where they're going, but they're being flown further into the country. And they're giving them not only shelter, but paperwork. And I think they're setting them up for a lot of things, none of which are to vote as well. I think they're going to let these people vote in 2024. I mean, what are your thoughts? That's a lot, but what are your thoughts right there?
Well, I mean, I've been reporting on this for 4 years, since 2 weeks, pretty much almost 2 weeks into the Biden administration. This is nothing new to me. This, in people who have followed Women Fighting for America for almost 4 years now. A lot of the information content that's coming out on all of the secular news media and podcasts and things like that quite frankly, if you go back, I've been talking about this from a national security perspective from almost day one of the Biden administration with open border policies. It's even worse than that. They're actually giving a lot of these individuals driver's license before they even hit the border. This is, by the way, illegal. This is treason against the United States of America. So our own governmental agencies are working through non-governmental organizations, the NGOs, which are funded by the taxpayer-funded dollars, to coach and to also obtain driver's license and ID cards for these illegals prior to them even crossing the U.S. southern border. And by the way, the northern border as well. We have to talk about the northern border. So we have this incredible porous border that our own government is actively engaged in acts against a sovereign nation to allow illegals, who most of them do not qualify for what is on a lawful term of asylum. And they're not even pushing them back. I think it's less than 10% of everybody coming over the border that this administration has actually expelled from the country. Lastly, Jason, the numbers that they're telling you are actual lies. So when they say an encounter, that is somebody that they physically encountered. They saw physically in front of them and encountered that individual. So when you look at the numbers that they're telling the American people, they use language like we've encountered, or we've estimated gotaways. Well, when they're estimating a gotaway, that's somebody who they didn't encounter, but they saw on some type of footage, camera system, private camera systems on properties, things like that. And so what they're not telling the American people is how many of those individuals that were not seen on that camera, because make no mistake, I've been down at the border. I've done, I don't know, over 150 border operations and missions, northern border and southern border. And so typically there's not one or two or three, four people that are walking in front of these cameras that trigger that camera system. There's a heck of a lot more people who are walking around the camera that you don't even see. And so when we've worked with law enforcement, when we've worked with private sector ranchers, other entities looking at the camera and the data and all of the data coming in West Coast, East Coast, northern, southern border. America, I'm going to give you a number that really literally should not only shock you and astonish you, but it should scare the heck out of you. And if I don't know what else to do to sound the alarm, but we have upwards of over 32 plus million under the Biden administration alone. And we really can't quantify the actual number because there's too many other variables involved in this. But looking at all of the information that we've gathered, we've estimated these people who do this for a living, by the way, who are paid in the private sector by the government, contractors, we've looked at the numbers and it's estimated somewhere over 32 plus million who have actually entered the border under the Biden administration.
So to put that into perspective for people, that would be somewhere between 8% to 10% of the current population in the country. And constantly we hear about how we can't have health on healthcare. Forget about universal healthcare. We can't bring the prices down. We can't help you out on that. Social Security, that's on the table. But somehow we're able to take an influx of almost 10% of the current population of the country through taxpayer dollars and these basically fronts for an agenda, these non-government organizations. Can you tell us how that works? What organizations are we talking about and how much money are we really funneling to them to ensure this process?
So non-governmental organizations, a public-private partnership, and a lot of money laundering, a lot of funneling, a lot of corrupt activity goes through that public-private partnership. And I can talk very clearly on this because in my previous life, we were government contractors. And so we have taxpayer funded dollars being paid to organizations like Catholic Charities, which is one of the biggest benefactors of your taxpayer funded dollars to allow this illegal invasion to, quite frankly, undermine and destroy the very fabric of this nation. You've got Bethany Christian Services, Methodist Services. I mean, fill in the blank. I could list probably 40, 50, 60, 70 organizations right now who are currently making profit off of the government grant money through taxpayer funded dollars. And make no mistake, these nonprofit organizations are 100% for profit. They are also aiding and abetting human trafficking, which, by the way, is not only illegal in the United States of America, but there's international laws to protect trafficking. And so, where's the outcry of the United Nations? Where's the outcry of all of these humanitarian organizations who are trying to say that they're fighting against human trafficking? The other thing that most people don't understand either is every single time an illegal crosses the border illegally, they are paying a price, a financial price to whether it's $75 or whether it's upwards of over $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, right? Depending on the high value target or if they're a low value individual that has to pay for crossing. Every single dollar that they are paying to the cartel are then in turn turned into funding terrorist activities, drugs, weapons, Hamas, Al Qaeda. So we are actually not only funding the demise of our country from weakening us, the very fabric of our country through our systems, our school systems, our welfare system, our social security systems, all of the strain that this puts on us, but we're also in turn also funding terrorist activity. So to kill individuals, American citizens, our military, all of these attacks that you're seeing with the weapons Hamas is using and the Houthis, where do you think that money gets funneled back to from the cartel? Because the cartel work hand in hand with both Chinese mafia, Chinese terrorists, the PLA. They work hand in hand with Iran's Revolutionary Guard. They work hand in hand with the Quds forces. They work hand in hand with Hamas and Hezbollah. So we are funding the demise completely on all surrounded fronts of our country. This is a national security implication. And again, what the Supreme Court justices did was weaken in America on purpose and take away the states' rights to defend and protect their borders, period. And so we are at unprecedented ground. And America, you better buckle up because 24 is going to get a lot more rough.
I believe that. We got to take a break, but before we do, you've got an event coming up in March. Tell us about it.
This is so incredible. We have to do this. I wish we didn't, but we have to. It's called MEET, MEET, for America.org. So meetforamerica.org. You can go to my website to get more information. But this is training. We're going to train you how to be a citizen emergency response team, how to work with your local law enforcement, how to protect and defend the most precious, right? If there's an active shooter, a terrorist attack, all of these things, all of these scenarios that unfortunately we are going to face, just like Israel faced on that fateful day on October 7th. We have thousands upon thousands of terrorists in cells in the United States of America waiting for the order given by their leaders to attack American citizens, soft targets. So we'll get into that. So Meet for America, we're going to bring in some incredible experts, the best of the best in their field. We're talking about special force guys, right? We're going to spend a full day to come in and train you lawfare, like I said, how to be a defender and a protector for the vulnerable, how to work with your local law enforcement, how to understand tactical civics, how to start citizen grand juries, how to put the power back into the hands of the people, right? This is not an activity that is for individuals who aren't serious about understanding our constitutional principles and values and what our role is as American citizens to secure our country and our nation.
All right, we'll be back after this with more with Christie Hutcherson.
Banks are supposed to be the safest placeholders for cash in the world, but in 2022 that changed. The Federal Reserve pulled out $2.5 trillion of liquidity out of the banks, and the Fed also changed the requirements so banks don't need to keep any funds on hand. This means banks are starved for liquidity.
Well, another day of freezing weather, another day migrants are spending out in the cold.
And it's not just at the reticketing center in the East Village. Fox 5's Jessica Formosa shows us where else they're waiting in line.
Another cold day in New York City, but the Arctic temperatures not keeping migrants from standing on long lines for hours, some even spending the night, all to receive shelter and services.
I've been here 8 o'clock last night. and I sleep there until this hour of the day. Hace mucho frío.
It's really cold, said Catherine, who showed up at 4 a.m. with her 4-year-old son.
Hay mucha gente.
There are a lot of people and only 200 spots a day. You need the ID, so I have to get up early to get a spot. The Ecuadorian mother trying to keep her son warm, rubbing his feet as she waits to get inside this city office in Brooklyn to obtain an ID NYC card.
No tener dinero.
To not have any money, no job, it's complicated. And so you end up on the street. And one can wait for hours out here just to get inside and be told to come back.
I need ID or a passport with a photograph. And I didn't come in here with no passport.
But there is a misconception that an ID NYC card will automatically lead to a job. In order to work legally, one must be granted a federal work authorization, which is a long legal process. Migrant advocates worry that misinformation coupled with the desperation we see out here is the reason these migrants are willing to risk their own health in the bitter cold. The city says it's under a code blue. With these dangerous temperatures and more snow on the way, no one should be sleeping on the street.
By law, we have to find places for people so that they can be in out of the cold. So we will, of course, do that for our migrant brothers and sisters also.
But we continue to see migrants sleeping on the streets of New York City. Just yesterday here at St. Bridget's, we saw a couple show up after hours. They had nowhere to go. There was a sign on the door with an address to a warming center in the Bronx. The problem, they had no money to get there. In the East Village, I'm Jessica Formoso, Fox 5 News.
And we are back with Christie Hutcherson. Christie, you brought a PowerPoint, but before we get into that, I want to talk about how much money, you just talked about the cartels and the money moved with people. I've heard it range from $5,000-$10,000 a person, sometimes more. But when they come into this country, how much is being moved via each of these people they're bringing in?
You mean from the cartels, or how much are we
No,
funding?
on the other side of the game. So in other words, these NGOs, what kind of money are they getting for these individuals who are then really literally put on the street? We have this video from New York where they're lined up around, a block to try to get paperwork to get to a shelter. It's negative 10 degrees there right now, folks. But yet, it looks like tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, are moving through this system via our tax dollars.
Oh, it's in the billions right now. So let me give you an example. So Catholic Charities, if you look at, they do have to disclose. So America, you can go do your own good due diligence and peel back. You have to understand where to look, because there's a lot of monkey business that does go on and how they hide figures. But in 2020, Catholic Charities had a well over $954 million, okay, in funding and taxpayer funding dollars and grants. It's now well over the $1.5 billion mark. Okay, that's just one organization. So this is a multi-billion-dollar operation. I call it the greatest money laundering scheme in the history of the United States. And make no mistake, there's always back channels and payoffs and pass-throughs that happen with all of this organization, because there's really no, once the money is given via grant money, et cetera, it's absorbed and there's no tracking of this money. Just like you're seeing in Ukraine, there's no tracking of all of the billions of dollars we've been giving to the corrupt Zelensky government. And so we have to understand our government is not here to defend and protect you. They have a different agenda. And whether you're a Republican, Democrat, or independent, it doesn't matter to me. I'm talking about all of you. Our system has failed us. The government has failed us. It is corrupt at the highest of highest levels and the lowest of levels. And so we have an upside down government right now. And we have to understand what our role, again, is to take back this country. So you are funding billions of dollars into the hands of these NGOs to help to facilitate these illegals into our country. They're given credit cards, shoes, clothing, cell phones, housing. All the while, our own veterans who fought and sacrificed for our country and our nation live on the streets. I was just in Washington, D.C. I just got back. It was 17 degrees, and you see tent after tent after tent set up, and homeless veterans who don't have money, who don't have shelter, who don't have the clothing, but somehow we're able to give to illegals, by the way, who do not qualify for any of these services, let alone Social Security. And right now there's going on 5 states, Jason, who are implementing where illegals can now be security force for law enforcement to arrest legal American citizens. Do you understand what's going on, America? This is a replacement force. This is a replacement labor force. This is a replacement society, and it's certainly a replacement of your voice from here and into the future. They are coming over here, and it's, they multiply. We typically, historically, we have not been reproducing at a rate with a birth rate. So you will be outpaced and replaced with the plan that's in place by the globalist agenda. And so, Jason, we have to understand something too, really quick. This isn't just happening in the United States of America. We tend to have a very single-minded lens. I travel all over the world. I meet with world leaders. I've just got back a couple months ago from London and Europe and doing some stuff. Ireland, Italy, England, Netherlands, they are replacing population there as well, doing the exact same thing they're doing here on a massive scale with these immigrants. And they are replacing the free Western world, those individuals who would stand up, speak up for this one world type system.
So one of the aspects that is rather frightening is the law enforcement aspect, but taking that even further, there are politicians and especially media outlets that are now pushing for the idea that they can join the military to become U.S. citizens, kind of fast tracking these individuals, especially with low recruitment numbers, to come into our military. And you think people were following orders before, folks, and not pushing back enough against the hate and lie shots and other things. Well, it's going to be a lot more compliance if we allow this to happen. And the vast majority of the people that are coming into this country are young males, correct?
That is correct. 86% of everybody coming over the border are young adult males or males. 86%. They're not the UACs. They're not the family units like, Fox News and all of them. They've done great coverage, but they hone in on a lot of the children and things like that. In reality, 86% of everybody coming over the border are young adult males. And within those caravans, there are also, we're trained to look for militia type. We can pick out, me and my team can go in and literally go down the line and pick out every single person we believe is either part of another country's military or a militia group or from a terrorist organization. And so we are under serious threat to the United States of America currently right now. And nobody's talking about the fact that, you've got still 26 tons of ammonium nitrate that's not been found, or they're keeping it hush hush. We've got massive terrorist cells across this country and in this nation. We are currently actively searching for over 50 known terrorists right now, our 3-letter agencies, and they are looking for them currently. They have no idea where they are in the country. They just know through chatter and different channels that they are meaning to do harm to the United States of America. We've been talking to local law enforcement. We reported on the fact that the terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah are looking to target soft targets in the United States, which is school systems, to do mass casualty and kidnapping events to cause shock and awe. I believe all of this is going to lead up to the 24 election to create a massive amount of chaos. And what they do want to trigger, I believe, is a civil war inside the United States of America.
Well, I don't, I've talked about this civil war aspect. I think they want the visual perception of a civil war. In other words, pockets of resistance that they can clamp down militarily and declare a national martial law on. Because you go back to Civil War times, the geography, the fact there's only about 30 million people in the country, the military has the same weapon systems as the people. There's a lot of differences now, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't stage something or get some group to do something dumb. And they've obviously put the pressure on. Earlier we talked about the Supreme Court decision to no longer let the states have their own right to defend themselves on the border. Well, I would also say that the Supreme Court essentially saying that the people don't have standing to audit presidential elections when they're so erroneously stolen in front of our eyes was also one of these terrible decisions that show we don't have a constitutional republic. And one of the things that I have been concerned about is not only what I think is the imminent imprisonment of Trump prior to the 2024 election, the fact that if there is an event, a terrorist event in this country, or maybe somewhere in the Western world, Europe, Canada, etc., there wouldn't be a 2024 election, and we may never have even a semi-legitimate presidential election again. That's my fear. What do you think? Is there a possibility we don't have a 2024 election?
Well, yeah, I've been talking about this for the last 2 years, leading up to even into the 2022 election for different offices. But you know, martial law has only been activated. I believe somewhere between 5 to 6 times ever on American soil. And if you have this civil unrest, and people think of civil war kind of like what happened underneath the Civil War, right? This is a different civil war. It's gonna play out in a different way. Warfare is different right now, and so it's not just with physical weapons; it's with propaganda, media. I mean, there's just so much that goes involved with being able to create the civil unrest. And part of the tactics is using terrorist activity and things like that to put fear in people. But the only way that they can stop an election from happening is if there's so much unrest that you can't, under the disguise of you can't have a free and fair election, that martial law would have to be activated and postpone the elections. Is that plausible? Absolutely, 100%. It's, you know, they have plans. This hasn't been done overnight. These individuals who have had this one world system in place, starting the major launch of it in 1973, they've had over 50 years to perfect what they're going to do. Now, I will tell you this, Jason. They're a little nervous because their plans have unraveled a little bit because we had a disruptor like Trump, and then we had what happened in 2020. And people started digging in, and there's a lot of great American patriots out there who started exposing a lot of stuff. But they make no mistake, they're still ahead of us, and we don't play in the same sandbox together. We still like to work in silos, and that is our downfall. And you know, there's a lot of language that's used by the left, and they've brainwashed a whole entire next generation, and it's very difficult to overturn that overnight. So we have our hands full, so to speak. But we have to understand what's going to happen in 2024 is all going to be dependent on how many actual citizens engage in their civic duties. So really where this country is going to end up at the end of the day, it's in the hands of the people. The rest of the world's waiting with a bated breath to find out if we have the backbone and the fortitude to stand up, understand what our Constitution says, understand what the Bill of Rights are, understand in a peaceful way that we can take back our country. And we have to have the masses. And there is no time for weakness right now or being on the fence. You're either a freedom-loving American citizen who loves the Constitution, who loves this country, what it was based on and what it was founded on, or you don't. And that's kind of where we're at, unfortunately.
So with the Supreme Court decision, you know, I often tell people, number one, you got to take it upon yourself. Don't believe in heroes. Don't look to somebody else. You got to look in that mirror. But local law enforcement, sheriff's department in particular, has been one I've encouraged people to work with. With this ruling, it really does call into question what the sheriff's department would be able to do against a federal government force, whether it be a border issue or otherwise. Now, right now, we have a lot of these people being shipped into urban areas like Chicago and New York City, et cetera, but they're dispersing. You know, and they're also not only in middle America, they're all over the country. They're going to have to go to some of these suburban areas. Number one, I think it's still a good idea to get involved with your local law enforcement, your community, whether it be your school board or to your city council. But how much power will those people have? And if they haven't taken action yet, now is the time, no, to at least set up some kind of a legitimate opposition force.
So First of all, the urban centers where all of these illegals are being shipped to is kind of a smoke and mirror game. Under the radar, these individuals have been shipped to rural areas all over the United States of America, including the state of Florida. Even Governor DeSantis is all of this stuff that he says out there, he has not done enough to protect and defend his citizens of his state. They've been shipped to all of these agricultural centers. You can go anywhere, pretty much anybody, walk into a Walmart. I always say Walmart's always the gauge of what's going on in your community and the population change from an ethnic group. So start going into your Walmarts and start seeing exactly who's in shopping now in your communities. You're going to see tons of illegals from 174 plus different nations. And so, we have, they're already here. The damage is done. There's no turning back. It's going to be a very difficult uphill battle to take back this sovereign country. And I hate to be the doomsday person, but it's really the facts. However, there's still more of us than there are of them. So we have to engage at an unprecedented level. Opposition force and opposition militia groups and things like that, because I believe that that's what you're asking me. I believe there's a time and a place in history for that. Now is not the time and the place in history for that. I work with a lot of law enforcement across this country. There's so many good law enforcement officers out there. And make no mistake, I don't care if the Supreme Court came in and said XYZ. They understand what the real Constitution says and what the duties of the American citizens are and what their duties are for the most part. So in Meet for America, our training class, actually one of the individuals who comes in and trains us, he's actually a border sheriff. And he's going to teach you how to work in conjunction in your community with your local law enforcement. Because at the end of the day, they are the highest level of law enforcement in the land. Contrary to what the federal government wants you to believe, the DOJ and the CIA and the FBI, they actually have to get permission from the sheriffs to enter their county and to go knock on your door and to remove you from the house. This is a fact. So again, this is ignorance in what we need to understand about what the rights really are and who has the authority. And so when we partner with local law enforcement, when we partner and create citizen grand juries, and we partner with what the Constitution has laid out for us to do, when a government is rogue, when our government no longer serves the people, it is not a government for the people, by the people, we have a duty, because the founding fathers understood the corrupt hearts of men. And that's the reason why I believe, and many other scholars and constitutional scholars believe, that they wrote the Constitution the way that they did, because they knew that someday there would be this overreach of government, that these men would become corrupt and vulnerable to blackmail, etc., and power, greed, all of those things. And so they gave us a map, a roadmap on how we are to peacefully, lawfully take back our government that has gone rogue. And so in Meet for America, that's exactly what we're going to give you the tools to be able to do. I am not a proponent of creating militia groups and all that stuff. I believe everything we need to do needs to be underneath the umbrella of the law. We need to work under the umbrella of the local law enforcement and sheriff officers and be directed by them. And when we do that, they can't win. We win at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I just want to clarify. That's exactly what I meant. When I say opposition force, I mean to the agenda and working with the sheriff's department, your city council, doing it lawfully and politically. We got to take another break, but when we come back, I do want to go through this presentation. We're with Christie Hutcherson, and it's Making Sense of the Madness. Back after this.
When I invented my pillow,
size My Pillow for only $19.
Are of these porous borders, and even what the Supreme Court just did. As we know, as you see right there, we have Biden. He's the puppet master. Everyone knows the man can't put two sentences together. He is completely controlled by the deep state, those individuals who want this globalist agenda. people ask me all the time, Christy, who are they? What is their plans? How does it look like with all these different countries and world leaders? Why would they give up their power for this one world system? So the easiest explanation I can make is, if you think about, we have 3 different branches of government. We have the executive branch, we have the legislative branch, and we have the court systems. And then of course we have the military, etc. So in 1973, when Klaus Schwab created the World Economic Forum, this was the catalyst that began all of this one world system, parallel governmental societies. NATO was created out of this. The IMF was created out of this. The WHO. We've got all of these different organizations, NATO, UN. So think of the World Economic Forum. The branch of the Senate and the House, right? And then you've got the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, which is all of the banking systems all around the world. And then if you look at the WHO, the World Health Organization, think of them as the CDC, Pfizer, and all of the biotech and pharmaceutical companies underneath that umbrella on a global scale. NATO, of course, and then you also have NATO is the military might of the world, the new world system. And so if you think about it that way, that's how the parallel government has already been set up. So it's in place. All of the different world leaders have a role at the table, just like they do at the United Nations. That's the reason why you see all of these world leaders and spokespeople from all of these different countries engaging in the United Nations. And so, and that's why they meet every year, twice a year. They have Davos, which just happened in Switzerland, and then they have Little Davos, which is in Aspen, Colorado, every year in June. And so the next slide, if you look at the next slide, this is from Central and South America all the way up through Mexico into our southern borders. And if you look at the map, I'm showing Iran, China specifically. There's also Russia in there. They have a major footprint in these countries. They have been a growing threat. Our own intelligence agencies, military. Just recently, at last February, one of the biggest reports that came out off the desk of the intelligence community from the director of our intelligence, NSA, all said Iran and China and Russia have a huge growing threat and footprint in Central South America, the Caribbean, Mexico, and by the way, also in Canada. You've got the Panama Canal, which is very, very strategic. It is one of the major trade routes for supplies, food, everything, coming in from the west to the east into the United States of America. China pretty much completely controls and owns all of the Panama Canal. We are starting to see that even during the pandemic and things like that, they can shut it down or turn it on whenever they want to. They can control how much supplies are on the cargo ships. They can control how many cargo ships go through that a day, which of course, if that's cut off, we are going to be cut off and we will be crippled here in the United States. Next slide, please. So funding terrorism through the drug trade industry, using trade routes to smuggle weapons, drugs, humans, terrorist training camps throughout Latin America, Mexico, Central America. All of this, like we talked earlier, Jason, is funding the terrorist activity who are attacking our military bases in Iraq currently right now, all over the world. We are funding our own demise, our own terrorism, and giving all of this money to Hezbollah. Why? Because we have open borders. Biden's administration 100% knows this. This guy has been in office for well over 50 plus years. He understands all of this. He's been briefed on this. He's been in SCIFs and things like that to understand exactly who the threat is, why, even the Houthis. He knew that they were a terrorist organization when he took them off the terrorist watch list when he became into office. And then now he's just put them back on. This is, again, they know this, and they're using these entities and these organizations, I believe, to further their agendas and their plans for this one world system. So we're funding all of this through cocaine and fentanyl, carfentanil, weapons, all of human trafficking. Next slide, please. So this I'm going to just briefly kind of go over. Last summer, this particular this cargo plane landed and was grounded in Argentina. On that plane was 14 cyber intelligence operatives out of the country of Venezuela. there were 4 individuals from Iran. Next slide, please. These 4 individuals right here on your screen, these guys are really bad guys. The gentleman down below on your left-hand screen, he is the head of one of the head generals for the Iran's Revolutionary Guard. These guys are terrorists. That cargo plane, by the way, was a sanctioned U.S. cargo plane, and it was also carrying highly sophisticated cyber equipment, not auto parts, like they said on their manifesto. Why does this matter? Because they landed not only in Caracas, Venezuela, Mexico City, then landed in Argentina. The only reason why we know about this plane and this existence of this plane is because they try to refuel in Uruguay. Uruguay ran the real tag numbers off this plane and realized this was a U.S. sanction and didn't smell right, so they didn't allow them to land to refuel. So they had to go back to Argentina, where the Uruguay government had already contacted one of the generals inside Argentina to let them know that this was a suspicious plane. So they were met on the tarmac and they were arrested. And lo and behold, this is how we know it was on that plane. Next slide. So key takeaways, Iran's 6-month plan. By the way, I wrote this report last spring. So this is a little bit old. So think about this 6 months plan has already been activated. So to seek to further strengthen their presence in the continent by using cooperation with its trade allies and in the region. So the leader of Iran just got back from a 6-country tour this fall, where they just now signed in 6 different countries in Central South America, new treaties to allow Iran's footprint inside these countries. They already have a footprint, major footprint in Bolivia and Colombia and also Venezuela. But now Nicaragua and some other countries came on board, and they have a 20-year treaty, which, by the way, now allows them to bring in more military-grade weapons, more troops, Quds forces, Iran's Revolutionary Guard, and terrorists. The picture on the bottom right where you see these, they look kind of like missiles. Those are drones. Those particular drones are military drones. They're Mohajar drones. And those drones are in warehouses that we've identified in Bolivia, which, by the way, Bolivia, they are used by Iran to house their military-grade equipment. These drones can carry ballistic missiles, which now can reach the United States of America. Next slide, please. Again, this is the Triple Frontier. This is the sector where Iran has had major footprint and stronghold into the Triple Frontier, down in Paraguay, Uruguay, Bolivia, all of that region. There's training camps that have been set up. By the way, they're also now, they've had training camps that we know of since 2012. Our 3-letter agencies, the CIA and the FBI, 100% know this. They've briefed several presidents on this. The training camps where Iran's Revolutionary Guard and Quds forces are currently and actively been training with Mexican drug cartels just south of the border from Texas all the way through Arizona. One of those training camps was identified about 38 miles from Brownsville, Texas. So this is a growing threat. Now these individuals, because of Biden's policies, has allowed these well-trained, well-armed terrorist organizations to come into our borders under the disguise of asylum or to just sneak over the border and be absorbed into the caravans. Next slide, please.
Christie, we've got to take a break. When we come back, I do want to expound on the terrorist threat, the administration, and really how it seems to be destroyed by design. It's making sense of the madness. Back after this.
Fire, EMS, or dispatch, they help raise money to be able to pay for.
Mention the fact that some of these groups have been taken off of terrorist watch lists. Meanwhile, we've seen an incremental move to demonize and go after American citizens as terrorists, which has exploded under the Biden administration, encompassing quote unquote MAGA extremists, Christian nationals, etc. When you look at that aspect of it, and then you look at things like the January 5th pipe bomber that seems to be leading back to the Justice Department or the Department of Homeland Security, does this look like to you that they are trying to set up a powder keg or an event so that they can kick off a further military conflict?
Oh yeah, 100%. These are well-trained operatives. If America understands the history truly of the United States and some of these governmental agencies like the CIA and the FBI, for example, one of the reasons why John F. Kennedy actually was assassinated was because he was actually going to dismantle the CIA. The CIA answers to nobody. It's actually, in my opinion, an unconstitutional agency. He only answers to the President of the United States. And so they operate without impunity all over the globe. They destabilize countries. This has been going on well for 50 plus years. And so they have a secret Air Force. They have a secret airline, the CIA does. They actually even have a force within a force that we don't even know about. It's kind of like if people ever watched Mission Impossible Force, with Tom Cruise, that actually exists within our own government, and they help to destabilize and topple down other governments. This is a known fact. We have documents to prove it. And so this is very, very dangerous ground that we're working on. And the CIA, I believe, is used as a destabilization force for the globalist currently right now. And when you look at the CIA's knowledge of what's going on south of the border, for example, let's go back to the 70s and 80s. The cartels became very powerful with the help of our own CIA government. They would help give arms. They would give money to further the cocaine development, to the coca plants and stuff. This is fact. You can research this information. I'm not putting anything out there that's not out there for you.
We've got to take another break, but I would encourage people to check out the Iran-Contra scandal, because that's the last time we really got to have a veneer into the quote-unquote shadow government and any sort of accountability, which ultimately was still quite the whitewash on what they were doing in drug running, in arms dealing, and trafficking of human beings, on top of a lot of other things. We got to take that break. When we come back, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to talk one more time about this event coming up in Kansas City, Missouri, March 15th to the 18th. Meet for America. It's making sense of the madness. Final segment after this. Final segment with Christie Hutcherson. Christie, we've only got a couple minutes left in the broadcast. What would you like to leave the audience with, and how can they support you and get out and be active if they are in that Kansas City area?
Yeah, if you're within a 200-mile radius, I really highly recommend, or you fly in. I can't think of a better way to spend your weekend than being with some incredible experts in their field. We have Tom Renz, who's going to be talking about lawfare. We have Ann Vanderson, who's going to be talking about practical and tactical civics. We have Mel Kay, who's going to be talking about the world globalist society. And of course, you have me and my team of law enforcement experts and special forces who are going to be coming in and spending time with you to really roll up our sleeves. This is intense. This isn't, you don't even have a break you can go grab your lunch and come back to your seat. This is a very serious, intense 12-hour training day that you need to take seriously. And you're going to have homework to do, and you've got requirements afterwards. We're going to train you how to be a citizen emergency response team member, how to be active in your community, and how to be with your local law enforcement, how to be in community with one another, how to really fortify. I hear so many people are like, oh yeah, we know what we're doing. No, you really don't. We're also going to give you the equipment that you actually truly need. There's so much misinformation out there. There's all of these bug out bags and this, that, and the other communications that you need. And a lot of it is garbage. We're actually going to weed through all of that. And we're going to come alongside of you and partner with you to be an active participant, finally, an active participant in this constitution, in this constitutional republic called America. So it's very important. Meetforamerica.org. Please get your tickets now. Ticket sales will close 7 days prior to the event. After 7 days 7 days before the event, ticket sales will close, and we will not be selling. You can't buy tickets at the door. This is something that you have to buy in advance. And because, like I said, you're going to have homework. You'll get a welcome letter from us explaining exactly how the weekend's going to look. And we're looking forward to it now more than ever. If you're tired of just speech and people going around this country and just speaking and talking about the problems, this is an actual day of solutions and practical solutions and tangible things that you're going to be able to take with you long before the day ends and moved on forward to save this country.
Christie, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you guys for joining us here on Patriot.tv. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And folks, I am so happy to announce that Patriot.tv is expanding into all sorts of goodies, not just news you can trust, but podcasts, entertainment as well. So if you want to support that type of thing and go against this